Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of On Air. Today I am joined by Charles Smee. Charles is the founder of Transaction Focus. We're going to be talking about an interesting one today. We're going to be talking about growing into international markets, taking your business over borders into other countries across EMEA and the things that you should think about and the things that work and don't work along that. I'm looking forward to learning a bit, something that I've done a bit of, but not a huge amount of. And see over the last couple of years, it's become more and more viable for countries to expand or for organizations to expand. And yet there we are with, I'm sure, organizations assuming it's easier than it really is. And Charles is going to help us unpick that. Charles, firstly, thank you for joining us. And how are you?
My pleasure. I'm feeling great. Thanks, Owen. Yeah, really good.
Glad to have you on the show. We always like to give our guests, before we get into topic, 2 minutes just to talk about who's Charles, who are Transaction Focus, and perhaps for those people that don't already know you could give some context.
Good. Well, thank you very much. Welcome. Nice to meet you all, the on-air marketing team and everybody, all the audience. So yeah, so I'm Charles. I'm founder of Transaction Focus. We were established in 2004, so we're having our 18th birthday next week. And we're established to help companies grow faster overseas. So my background, I'm very fortunate. I've worked in a lot of different markets. So in France, Romania, Hungary, within Europe, and I've worked in Hong Kong, Malaysia, South Korea, and Vietnam, totaling about 9 years in Asia. So we have strong experience, and we're a network of 50, 60 sales and marketing rounded sales and marketing professionals in each country, who help you see the wood from the trees and help you stop you falling over obstacles when you enter in different markets. So that's what we do. So we help you go quicker, but we also know the lay of the land. We have, if you're talking to go into, whether you're talking to go to Ghana or Malaysia, we have people on the ground who can hold your hand and then select a team alongside you. We call it collaborative co-sourcing. So we co-manage the project with you, and we take responsibility for that, and we protect your brand as well. So that's what we do. It's very simple.
Exciting. It must be really interesting, I have to say, first and foremost. It's a fascinating sector to be a part of. I'm keen to just understand something to start off with, which is the why. What are the most common reasons that you see organizations looking to go into a new territory or a new country? Is it that they've mastered their own territory or country, or is it that they see something that's bigger and better overseas?
Well, there are different reasons, I think. It's a great question. So sometimes it's to expand revenue and become less dependent on their own economy. Yeah. Whether it could be Mexico, or it could be Canada, or wherever they're coming out of, and to find, and to obviously, exponentially from companies going outside the UK, for example. I think the DTI, Department of Trade and Industry, say that on average companies would expand into global markets, they grow their turnover by 40% on average. So if you think about that, some might grow their turnover by 5%, others might grow by 2,000%. So there's a lot of opportunities, and a lot of companies are perhaps a bit timid, about reticent. They're slightly fearful in some cases of going into a new market they don't know, and that's where we come in. And it's easier than you think, although you've got to do a very clear step process to get it right.
And I think there's a really interesting point. It's easier than you think is a lovely comment coming from somebody who's done it for 18 years. And of course you'll know things, and of course you don't know what you don't know. And I'm keen to maybe dig into that and understand what are some of the maybe the misconceptions, some of the assumptions that you see people make around moving into international markets that maybe aren't real.
Yeah, and well, I've done it for a bit longer than that, because I've done it for 18 years Transaction Focus and over 30 years in markets and running ventures. But the point is that I think sometimes you think it's quite easy to sell from US into France or somewhere, and it can be initially it can be easy, but you can become unstuck after a period of time by the local regulations. You can end up paying quite a lot of tax. You can end up getting into employment tribunals. You can fall over a lot of obstacles which you don't see in the beginning, and it can perceive. And with COVID, we've had to be, we've had to be quite bold sometimes and say, right, okay, well, I've got somebody in the UK, and I might as well have somebody in France and Germany, and I've never done it before, but let's just go for it. But sometimes you've got to be a bit more careful, and you've got to think it through. And if you're going into an international market the first time, you've got to work out whether what's your strategy is going to be like. There are three ways of growing a company: is direct sales, which you and I know about a lot, inside sales and outside sales, and then there's indirect sales, which is working with partners and distributors. And then you can actually, if you want to grow faster, sometimes you can purchase, you do by acquisition. We mainly focus on the direct and the indirect sales, and we help you with experienced people on the ground to just show you and to guide you. And sometimes we're setting you on your way, and you go and do it your own way. And sometimes we're accompanying you for several years. We obviously like to work with clients where there's a natural fit, and generally we help clients, and if there could be a natural, maybe in the first few weeks you can decide you want just some knowledge from us. But some clients we're working with a client now we work for 12 years. So and we work with Intel Corporation for 5 years. We're still working with them, and so we work for other companies sometimes for 3 years or 2 years. So we don't see it as short-term sales projects or just pure lead gen projects. We like to close the loop and provide the support on the ground to make sure you sustain and keep profitable customers coming back for more and more. That's what so it's natural, sustainable revenue growth. That's what we like doing.
And of course, there will be obvious things that, as a naive founder of a business that's never grown into an international market before, there are some obvious things that stand in your way. Language being one of them that everybody can pick up. If I'm going to go into France, I probably need to think about speaking some French, or having people that can speak French, and collateral's got to be changed to French, and so on and so forth. I guess it's the less obvious things that often get in the way because they're less prepared for. If you don't use somebody like yourself or work with somebody who's done it before, maybe you could shine a light on some of those common mistakes that people make as they go into new markets.
Yeah, we've even had I think it's the skills. First of all, you've got to have. I go into business meeting. Lived there for 3 years in France. I speak with an English accent, but I speak very fluent French. My ex was French. We were together for 29 years. So I'm very familiar, but I wouldn't go into a meeting on my own, a key meeting in France with a board of directors. There's no way, or even just an individual meeting. I think you've got to have a local partners, a local team, and sometimes sometimes SaaS is not that simple. We were actually working with a French client coming in, selling into the NHS. And sometimes you need that creative thought of process during when the NHS got closed down. You obviously couldn't sell software and hardware to the NHS, so we brought in a crisis PR person to help us, who's based down if you ever need her, she's based down the road from you, Owen. So she's great, and so you needed to talk about a communication strategy towards an NHS, which is lockdown. So you need special. So I think sales. I worked a lot in marketing agencies, so I think sales and marketing is all about brand talk, about having the right conversation at the right time, whether it's on the telephone, whether it's tweeting, whether it's however. We need to get that communication together, and I think we do that very well. And we perhaps need partners like you occasionally to help us in our marketing to look at a campaign, how we can do something together. So it's getting the communication right and getting the planning right and what you want to achieve. And it's like anything, it's like setting that goal. If you're going into France, how are you going to, who you're targeting, why, and you can target them from an office in Canada if you want, if they're French speaking. But what's your stage approach? And we help you, having done that many times, do it quite well. I don't know whether I've answered your question. How I answered the question?
Yeah, no, it's brilliant. We're learning, and I think, well, I guess what I'm keen to try and uncover is, if I was going to do this by myself and I wasn't going to come and talk to Charles and his team, what are some of the mistakes that I'm likely to make that you would help me to avoid? And maybe that's a better way of framing it, because I'm assuming, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I'm assuming one of them might be the cultural piece. You've got to understand the culture and take the time to learn that, in Asia you give a business card with two hands, for example, and silly little things like that can, in reality, can win or lose you a deal in a different country.
Yeah, that's if you're CEO of a SaaS company and you're going over to Japan, or that's, you sort of bow your head and give two hands. And that's just polite. We talk about IQ and EQ, emotional intelligence, and then what we call a CQ, cultural intelligence. That's the basics. And your senior level people need to be up to speed on that. So sometimes we bring in cultural people who might be Japanese or whatever if you're going to Japan, to help you. So that's quite important. But it's finding the people on the ground. And if you're not Japanese, you don't know which best Japanese person to find. If you're not French, you don't know the intricacies of finding. You and I hire sales and marketing people all the time, so we kind of know that in the UK or elsewhere. So you need the people. You need to rely on very trustworthy people on the ground, who aren't just corporate people. We have people who are very senior people who oversee the project and protect your brand. Most importantly, it's about brand stewardship. We take that very seriously. Okay, and it's also finding, they understand they can find the right people who are going to be genuinely represent you, rather than. And there's a lot of churn at the moment with salespeople globally, with the great resignation, everybody and wanting to work from home. So it's also more important getting the work-life balance in line with the culture, in line with the expectations. It's a lot of there's quite a lot of work involved. What we call we don't. I sometimes think, maybe sometimes you think it, I could have made far more money just setting up a sales recruitment company. but you and I know, Owen, that's the easy part, isn't it? So actually, recruitment is easy, but it's actually getting a salesperson who generates sustainable, continuous revenue, and gets better and better. And part of what we do, which is sales outsourcing, is to improve your process or enable you to grow internationally, improving what you do in your own country. So that's our challenge, and we're quite candid about that. We're very direct with you in a very pragmatic and collaborative sense. So so that's there's a whole, to me, it's a whole art, actually. Sales and marketing's you can do it completely differently, but still be successful. And that's why I've been doing it for so many years, because it's such fun.
And I think you hit the nail on the head there. As you said earlier, it'd be easier to make money doing something, but you wouldn't enjoy it as much. And I think that's a critical component of anything. You just touched on something there that I want to just stop on for a minute. You talked about suddenly you've got to go recruit somebody in another country. Maybe they're working in their second language. And how do you know what a good employee looks like in Japan if you've not worked there, or you're not Japanese, and any other country is the same? And I think there's a really interesting point in there around, as an organization, not only do you need to sell differently, market differently, and operate differently, you also need to employ differently. And I guess there's got to be a consideration around not just culture as in international culture, but culture as in within the organization, and the way that it needs to shift to accommodate people who are coming from another continent, another country, where they do things differently. You can't just keep the same settings running and just assume that people will adopt into that and buy into it and just conform. But actually, I guess the whole organization needs to shift somewhat.
Yeah, I think that, I think organizations which are naturally multicultural, so they could be San Francisco based, and they could have a mixture of maybe Chinese, African, all types of people. I think they naturally get it much quicker, and they adapt quicker. Sometimes if you've got an all British board, we're probably the worst actually. If we have an all British board, we don't adapt very quickly sometimes. And so it's very important to have a multinational culture. But we can change that for you because we can coach you and help, you can mentor you as well. But yeah, it's that adaptation of making sure that you understand the challenge ahead, and not assuming you know everything. Sometimes you can be successful initially and get quick revenue, and then sometimes you can become unstuck, and that's fine. But as long as you know, it's like being a sports person, international tennis player or international golfer, and you suddenly realize you do rather well, and then something doesn't go so well. You have to then perhaps change your coaching team, or bring in a mentor, or bring in a cultural advisor, or a local country. So we can be brought in at a late stage as well.
Yeah, really interesting. When you think about the countries that you've helped organizations expand into, are there any that stick out as being particularly, I don't want to use the word easy, but easier, let's say, where it feels like the change isn't as big, where there's not as much friction? And equally at the other end, are there some that are kind of, not avoid at all costs, but maybe are harder on the scale, let's say?
Yeah, I think we found, we always advise people, if you go into Asia Pacific, you start in Singapore. We worked quite closely with the British Chambers of Commerce and Department, and so we helped a pharmaceutical company in East Midlands get a contract with Singapore Health with our team on the ground, and that was quite easy because it's, I suppose, British. A lot of companies do start with the. It's funny, I'm going up to the Commonwealth Games on Friday, but it's start with the Commonwealth, and it's kind of, or you can go into sort of South Africa or Australia. Australia's quite harder than people think because they think it's easier, but it's very expensive getting into Australia, getting good salespeople. So I see people but it's somewhere like Singapore can be very, that's getting expensive. So you might decide to go to Malaysia. You've got, which is also quite straightforward. So some countries are, they're not so hard. Some people think it's easier selling into the States. So I think doing inside sales effectively, you can do it from Exeter and call into the USA with good people very effectively. But maybe then when you go on, have to grow your business, it then becomes more complex because then you have people on the ground, and so there are different ways of doing it. Different phases.
It's interesting you talk about the Australian piece. I lived and worked in Australia for 8 years, and it's one of the things that you often see people making big mistakes on is that the change in cost of labour, cost of operation is substantial. And if your income is relative to that of an economy that works in a different way, and you go and just try and slot the same model, and it's so important, I guess, that you do that research around not just culture and the soft piece, but also the tangible, how much it actually costs, what taxes have I got to pay, what's the cost of labour, what are the employment laws, how hard is it or easy is it to maneuver people in and out of the business if I need to, all of those sorts of things that, I guess that takes a hell of a lot of work to get to the point where you're confident this is the right or wrong decision.
Yeah, I think that's why I think you've got to look at your progression of what your objectives are and how deeply entrenched in the markets it's. Sometimes you can just stay in the UK and get sales depending on what business you're doing. So you need to work it out with people on the ground who know the lay of the land. And Australia culture is probably not the most demanding, but on other aspects it can be, the distance. And, I actually lived in Australia as well. I went for a year, but I hitchhiked around Australia when I was 19, and before that the film called Wolf's Creek, I think. Which before that you were allowed to hitch around Australia. But, and then I had a project with the Scottish Energy partner, and we went out to Perth, Australia in 2011. It was great to go out to Perth, Western Australia during February. And they paid for us, and we did consulting for them, and they were going to launch a solar company in Europe, and so we were very excited. Then they asked us to show them how to sell better. So we set up a team in Scotland, but we had to get up. I think we had to get up at 4 a.m. to be on the phones at 6, and then the daylight saving changed, and then we had to get up at 1 in the morning and be on the phones at 5. And it got rather difficult, and then our pool of candidates got harder to recruit. You know? So you can imagine. So there's a lot of logistical issues, and that was just purely the pre-sales. Well, it's actually, we're closing deals on the phone as well, but that's a hard project. You know, so sometimes you've got to find a better way. You know.
Yeah, and it's interesting, that thing about time difference is a real challenge, and it's not one you can solve. It's not one that goes away ever. So, you know, I have an organisation that I work with very closely in Australia, and a business partner in Australia, and you have to live with that on an ongoing basis and make it work. And there's a huge amount of compromise that you don't think about, which is that it's going to eat into time that you might otherwise see as time there's personal time or family time or sleep time, and you know, that can be a fairly big commitment depending on what you've got going on in your life. And I would guess that there are a lot of underestimated moves into new territories from organizations who see the flashing light over here and think, oh, that's exciting, we can go into that territory, it's a great territory, there's however many businesses, a good strong economy, and they get in and go, oh geez, have we bitten off more than we can chew?
Yeah, that's right. I think people going to something like China, I heard that many times, that they get embroiled in the legislation, and it's quite hard, and then your brand might be compromised. You know, it can be very complex. So you need the local people, you need to listen to the local Chinese people, and sometimes having, like, you know, I'd listen to you about Australia because you lived there a long time. You know, so having somebody like that, having somebody in China who's maybe not necessarily just Chinese, seeing from the Chinese point of view, somebody who's lived there and done it themselves for their other companies.
Yeah.
So using a bit of an expat experienced person as well, alongside a local Chinese person. So having a bit of a team to help you is quite important, because you get a dual perspective.
Yeah, and am I right in thinking that you do a lot of movement across EMEA or EMEA, as I think you called it earlier? You know, that you're taking countries from the UK into the Nordics or into France or whatever it might be. Is that a lot of the work that you do now?
Yeah, actually, funny, we're helping a Turkish company from Ankara. It's a SaaS company again, government based, helping again, going into, funny enough, West Africa. We're not, we got a good team there, and so that's a bit unusual. Having I've been to Turkey many times, but I don't deeply understand the culture myself. But I've got a guy called Alpo on the ground. He's amazing, and then he knows our team in West Africa, so he's not really involved. But it's just, that's the sort of thing we're doing. Yeah, and you know, our job, you know, it's very simple. Our vision in 2004, or even before, was to have sort of truly fun, entrepreneurial, integral sales and marketing people in every country in the world, and that's what we're doing. And that was our vision, and we just helping SaaS and other companies grow naturally their business and grow themselves professionally overseas. Because I think as a CEO, you could become a highly successful US CEO, but then adapting and become a very highly successful international CEO is something very different. So we can help that transformation with our teams, and that's quite exciting, you know.
What advice would you give to somebody who was going into a new territory around the amount of time it takes to settle in, to maybe to start to see a return on your investment, to start to see it feeling like it's a good decision? Because I guess there's a period where it's pretty scary. There's lots of new stuff happening. You're investing in people and process and change, and you've got to trust the process for it to come through in terms of return and in terms of it feeling like it's settled and performing well. Is there a period of time you'd say you've got to sort of set your expectations at?
Well, it's like any sales conversation you have with any client. It's about the sales cycle length, typical sales cycle length, and when you're selling into government, it could be a year before you get a deal. But if you're setting up a simple SaaS software, it could be 10 days or a week or a few days, So that's it. But however, I think I'm always telling companies, because a lot of companies say, well, we want to start in, they're talking about now they want to start in Q4. And I'm saying, well, if you're going to start in Q4 in October, you've got to start planning now. You've got to really, and don't procrastinate. Because to get everything, the more time you have planning, and the more time we have to get it, the better, more successful we are. So it's sometimes I think you should plan at least 9 months, 9 months before you actually go into the market and actually expect to start selling.
That's really interesting advice, because that was my next question around, if you're going in January 2024, when's the time to start putting the plan together? And it sounds like it's March 2023. You've got to be.
Yeah, that's right. I think it's right, and you can do that even if you do it start at the end of this year and start thinking it through. You've got to register IP. You've got to think. What we do is we enable you to manage the sales team. So then you can hire the sales team from us, which is when we charge a typical recruitment fee about 15%. But you know that when you hire that salesperson, you really want them to work with you, and you know that they've got consistent results for you for 6 months to a year, and you can hire them off us, okay? But and that justifies, we've generated enough revenue to justify you to open up an office there, and then we bring in a team or refer you to other partners of ours who can set up an office and do it properly. But sometimes depending on the product, you might actually have to set up an office, or some sort of an office, whether it's a representative office, or even do a joint venture or find a distributor, and we help you do that process as well. We do distributor due diligence, part PDD, DDD, to make sure you get that absolutely nailed on, because it can all go very wrong in some, even in France, if you have a agent commercial, they actually can hold under law, they hold their client base. You can't go direct without being sued. So you go to in France, you think, oh well, I don't want to hire somebody under my own name. I just hire an agent commercial. You end up a year down the road, they own the clients, you don't. So not many people know that, and there's a law in every country. There's a different law.
It's those idiosyncratic things that you just don't know what you don't know, and it's one of the most powerful phrases in business, in life generally, isn't it? We make big assumptions that everything's the same, and it's absolutely not the case. I'm keen just one final question from me, just around any sort of, I guess, key bits of advice. So if I'm sitting here now, I'm the founder of a SaaS company, or I'm a VP or whatever it might be, and I'm thinking about, do I go over into EMEA? Do I go into West Africa? Do I go somewhere else? What are the top 3 or 5 things you'd be saying around, building out criteria for whether that could be a good decision or not? What are the things that you're looking at in that scenario?
Yeah, I think it's it's the same thing as you advise people. I think, and if somebody's coming to the UK from the US or whatever, you say, you look at your profitable, sustainable model. Okay, what's your ICP? What's your ideal client profile? Where are you going to get revenue most easily? Which country? Is it going to be in Sweden, or is it going to be in France, or is it going to be in Italy? And then you find out, and you might test all 3. So you set up you kind of test. We might go in. I took a client to an exhibition in Geneva the other day, and because that was for their product line. So you might go to an exhibition, and first year you might not actually have a stand because you're not sure. You don't, but you can look around and scout around and do that research. And that year, so that ideally should be done well a year before you launch. So it's just finding that market and doing that pre-research. If you find the Japanese the most prodigious in terms of research, they research everything 5 years ahead. But you don't necessarily need to do that. You can find quite quickly. So yeah, so that's the first thing, looking at the ideal client profile, finding the profitable, sustainable business model, and finding which countries is going to be the best opportunity for you. That's also the most important.
Yeah, fantastic. Charles, thank you so much. I'm really enjoyed hearing you talk about just the I guess the habits in different countries and the types of things that you've been through over the last however many years, helping organisations expand internationally. I guess it's fairly obvious in terms of who can you guys help, because assuming it's anybody who's planning to go into international markets and would like some support with that. But are there certain sorts of companies that you enjoy working with, or you feel are really strong for going into international markets that are looking at it right now? And also, how can people get in touch with you if they'd like to do that?
Well, you can just come onto our website and just email me. I think it's best to talk. We always do we always have you always get a few free sessions out of us, because we like to know whether we want to work with you as well, and whether you've got the right approach. Because if you feel that you haven't got the right approach, we're not going to waste our time and your time. And so it's very important that we have a few sessions and we can see, and then we get you very quickly onto our local team. If you say I want to go into Romania, we have our Claudiu, our Romanian partner, on the call very, very quickly. So you've got to have a connection with them. You've got to feel comfortable with them, and then that's what we do. And we go from there, and then we start planning. And then we might arrange an agreement. We look at an agreement and see how we move forward.
Brilliant. And just in terms of the organisations, there's certain types of organisations that you guys really enjoy working with?
Well, we work a lot in SaaS. We call it SaaS with 2 S's, software sales as a service. It's kind of what we do. However, we do we work for manufacturing companies. We work for food companies. We've done all sorts already, and we're happy to do. We're pretty sector agnostic, quite honestly. And so that's SaaS is sector agnostic. So
excellent.
Hardware. Traditional companies we help as well. Yeah. Fantastic. And sometimes companies talk to us and they come back to us 3 years later when they're ready.
Yeah, I can imagine. When it's the right time.
Yeah.
Charles, thank you.
Thanks for putting us on air.
No, not at all. Lovely to have you on. Really good topic to learn about, and something that I've not done a huge amount of. So really interesting to hear you talk about it. Thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate it.
You too. Thank you everybody for listening. Cheers. Bye-bye.